David Morgan is an expert on silver, gold, and precious metals investments. He's a world-renowned lecturer appearing on CNBC and the Fox Business Channel. He's an author, having penned Get the Skinny on Silver Investing. And Mr. Morgan is a regular contributor and friend of the Ellis Martin Report. David, welcome back to the Ellis Martin Report.
Ellis, good to be with you.
Now, you just released an expose on YouTube called Silver is the Achilles Heel to the Entire Economic System. And it's very interesting to see how you laid the case detailing the relationship between gold and silver and the economy.
Yeah, well, it's obviously passionately done with most of my work is. I point out that, gold's very important, and certainly gold has got a far higher status than silver on the precious metals world, as it has had basically from the inception of using gold and silver as money. But I also point out that there's an adage that he who owns the gold makes the rules. And when you think that through, you realize that the central banks still have most of the gold, at least half, if not more. And because of that fact, they still have control, if you believe that adage, that he who owns the gold makes the rules. Well, if we went back on a gold standard and they own most of the gold, who's going to make the rules? So I'm all for an honest money standard. I really favor a bimetallic standard, but that's not particularly what this video is about. It's about the fact that silver has been outside of the monetary system officially for a very long time. And that, I think, is an advantage, not a disadvantage, because it's more affordable to most people, and the amount of investable silver is actually less than the amount of investable gold. So I think that makes the system vulnerable. Now, I didn't actually choose the title. The gentleman that made the video for me did, and I don't really have anything negative to say about it. It's pretty powerful. Whether it's truly Achilles heel of the entire economic system or not, possibly is. I think that may be an overreach, but I also want to state that the real problem is anyone that follows the precious metals story fully and understands and is well educated on the topic realize that this debt-based monetary system is going to unravel and is unraveling as we speak and has been unraveling for quite some time, basically from September 2007 and manifested in about a year later in 2008, where the whole system was under extreme pressure, commonly referred to as the financial crisis of '08. So I just point out that silver is still a powerful force to be reckoned with. If silver leads gold or gold leads silver, I really don't have an issue either one, but silver is easier to move because it's a smaller market. I made a great deal of effort to point that out in this video.
You've placed a caption under your video on YouTube, and it says, "This video came from the heart. Please pass it along if you see fit." This to me means you have some real passion about what you speak about. What is your goal when you purvey a message like this?
Well, in this video I reference several things, but the main theme is that I talk about trying to resonate with the younger people. And I don't even know the age group as they're defined, Generation X and the millennials and that type of thing. All I know is, I have two teenage daughters, and then that's a generation, and then there's older generation above them. But I'd say, there's a lot of people that are probably in the 35 age group and younger that basically have a total distrust for the establishment, and rightfully so. I mean, basically my generation, for the most part, has not lived up to anything close to the principles that make a way of life beneficial to all citizens. We have corrupted the system to such a level that the ability to tell it like it is, to speak the truth, to count on somebody's word has really failed. I mean, one of the purposes of free speech or freedom of press particularly is that the press or the journalists are kind of a watchdog for the people at large. And if you go back into just American history, and you look at, Poor Richard's Almanac by Ben Franklin and some of the pamphleteers at the time, all they did was print the truth and pass it out to the citizenry, the general populace, and wake them up by reading what was really going on. But today, everything's politically correct. It's slanted in such a way. You can find a much broader base by using the Internet. And I point that out in this video, that if you really want to take some time and ascertain what's really going on, I think the Internet is your best choice, because there you truly have freedom of speech. And, of course, not everything on the Internet is accurate, but at least you have the ability to open your eyes, so to speak, and see different points of view and weigh it and decide for yourself what's really going on, as I said before. So I like the idea that the Internet is such an open forum, and it is, I think, one of the most important applications to come along in a long time. I was with another news reporting service many years ago, looking back almost a decade ago, and I said in one of those early interviews that I felt that the Internet's coming to the fore was probably as important in our time as the Gutenberg printing press was in that time. I mean, this is something so significant on a global basis that it's a game changer for everybody.
What do you think these young people should do when they digest this message?
Yeah, of course, it's an individual choice, and it really isn't buying silver, although that's certainly maybe implied, but that's not my main message. My main message is to think for yourself, have some critical thinking, question nearly everything, question the source, discover for yourself, learn and learn how to learn. That's the real message. I mean, basically, if you really want to have your God-given constitutionally secured rights, in other words, you want to live free, that takes responsibility. So the main point I'm trying to make at the end of this video is to be responsible for yourself, be responsible for your own decisions, learn and keep learning. And what you learn, pass it on, and be able to stand up for something. I mean, these young people that are upset, and again, I'll say rightfully so, are apathetic, I think, in a lot of cases. This is my observation, because they don't know what to do. Well, first thing you have to do is get very solid with what the truth is, and then be able to defend it or fight for it in certain cases. Now, when I say fight for it, I say that in a passive way. I'm a huge believer that Gandhi did it the right way, passive resistance. I mean, they did their march, and they had resistance, but they kept marching, and they did it as much as possible in a peaceful way. The Braveheart movie that concludes at the end, of course, was the end of the line, meaning that they basically were confronted where they had to fight. And that's, part of situations in history. Regardless, the point is that I think people have to take on self-responsibility. They have to be able to learn and keep learning, and they have to be able to have the conviction to move beyond their comfort zone, because the way that I see it is it always gets moved on to the younger generation. And as poorly as we have done as the baby boomer generation, we're passing that on to younger generation. And my goal would be that they can wake up and start to make some corrections. I wrote about this in the Morgan Report quite some time ago, and I believe that we're going to see a move toward what I call the minimalist lifestyle. And the minimalist lifestyle isn't so much having a low lifestyle, but it's having a lifestyle that I think resonates more with what's truly available, which means living within your means. And instead of bragging about having the fastest car or the biggest house, the bragging will be about having a car that's so efficient that it gets X miles per gallon, or a house that only uses so many BTUs to heat, or that type of thing. So it'd be revolving more around energy usage and how efficient your lifestyle is. It's not about quantity, it's going to be about quality. And I really believe that's the major trend that we're going to see lifestyle-wise going forward. And I actually applaud that. I mean, I'm a big advocate of, living within your means, if at all possible. And of course, the way the system is structured, everyone is encouraged to bring on debt almost immediately. I mean, once you're legal age, at 18, you almost instantly, if you're in college, get a credit card application, get a student loan, and, finish your education, and you finish your education, and then you're already in debt, and heavily in debt. And so you get your job, and then you get more debt to, buy a house or whatever. So the system isn't really set up to where you can easily move from your own ability to live a debt-free life, and I fully understand that. But it doesn't mean that can't be something that you can strive for. And you can see it turn around. With the Internet, I mean, you could probably now, and in the future more so, get an education that's just as good as any other education or close to it over the Internet for very little money. So now you don't have that student loan debt. And then as far as, buying a house, well, there'll probably be more cooperative situations where you can rent, which, college kids do already, where you have roommates and that kind of thing, and maybe they band together for 5 years or something so that they have a significant down payment for a home or something. So, I'm just thinking outside the box as usual, but all I'm suggesting is that there are alternatives out there. It's just usually takes a little more patience and a little more struggle, but certainly if you start off fresh in life, so to speak, meaning the young adult, and you don't have this debt burden on yourself, you certainly can accomplish a lot more, in my view, than you would if you've got a mountain of debt that's almost impossible for you to ever get out from under.
If many people are living that sort of lifestyle, don't the government and the banking system become more or less irrelevant?
Yeah, it would be irrelevant if everyone could do that, but it's impossible, I think. Just from the credit system alone, I think it's impossible, even though it would be nice. The credit system is pretty much a requirement in large scale. For example, construction loan to build an apartment building or to build a shopping center or whatever. Certainly you could go the private investors and you could pool capital and do it that way, and it's done. But generally speaking, it's a debt burden that the contractor places on himself, and he gets a construction loan, and that's debt-based. So there's so much that's just taken for granted to do it that way, and it's the accepted way to do it. And I think it'd be quite some time before it could be unwound, and I just don't see that. But it doesn't mean that loans can't be more prudently given, and of course that's the way the pendulum has now swung. The ability to just get a loan for a home in the early 2000s to the top of the real estate market was if you could breathe and put an X on a piece of paper, you could get a loan. Now, basically, you have to prove you don't need the money before you can get a loan. So it's gone the opposite direction.
Is the message that you're trying to convey the Patrick Henry credo, live free or die?
Pretty much. But with freedom comes responsibility again, as you asked, what was the main theme. And a lot of people, even though they might think that they want freedom, they really don't want the responsibility that goes along with it. Basically, the way I see it is between becoming an adult or staying a child. Most children depend on their parents, and that's the way it's set up by natural law. But there becomes a point where the child becomes an adult, and they love their parents, but they're not relying on them in any way, shape, or form. And using that as a metaphor, if you look at the adult population, that means that you're either relying on the nanny state, big government, in some way, shape, or form, or you are not. Well, most people like to pick and choose. They say, well, I really don't want any government interference in any part of my life. Oh, except for health care. That's okay. I want the health care to be covered. Or they don't want the health care to be covered, but they want unemployment insurance, because if I lose my job, well, then, I want my daddy or, my nanny to take care of me. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong. What I'm saying is that in the real adult world, you have to cut those apron strings and and have the responsibility to live under those conditions. And most Americans do not, because they're either fearful or they've been raised or they've been trained or believe certain aspects of the way society should be structured. The problem is that none of that can be upheld anymore. Those promises of the nanny state cannot be achieved. We've overpromised. And so there's a great deal of people out there that are going to get a huge awakening that socialism doesn't work. A socialist system that takes from the producers and gives to everybody, quote unquote, equally, fails, especially when there's more and more people that are on the taking side than on the contributing side. And we've been in that situation for quite some time. So, unfortunately, this thing isn't going to end well. And, again, people that really understand what's going on are going to see it clearly. I believe that the mainstream press, of course, will use scapegoats and probably obfuscate the situation to the point where it's very blurry, very hazy, and very undefined or ill-defined as far as the truth of what's taking place. They'll probably blame the wrong things on the wrong people, but nonetheless, the truth is the truth. And it's simply that we've overpromised. Too many people have depended not on themselves, but on someone else. In a true free society, to be free, you have to pay the price. Your decisions, right or wrong, are your decisions, and you get to have the benefit of making the correct ones, and you also have the opposite if you make the incorrect ones.
More to come in part 2 of this interview.